Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1, 6,000 Miles Away. The satellite phone crackled to life at 0200 hours. Ron Gillespie had been staring at the ceiling of his quarters in the forward operating base, sleep as elusive as it had been for the past 72 hours. The mission had gone sideways. 3 insurgents down, one of his men with shrapnel in his leg, and the intelligence they'd risked their lives for turned out to be a dead end. He grabbed the phone, expecting his CO with new orders. Instead, a voice he didn't recognize cut through the static. "Sergeant Gillespie? This is Detective Dennis Bradshaw, Riverside Police Department. I need you to sit down." Ron's blood turned to ice. He'd been deployed for 8 months, and in that time, the only calls he received were from the Army or his 12-year-old son, Zach, during their scheduled video chats. A detective calling meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. What happened? Ron's voice was steady, trained by years of controlling fear under fire. "Your son is at Mercy General Hospital. He's stable, but..." Bradshaw's voice tightened. "Mr. Gillespie, I've been doing this job for 23 years. What your ex-wife's husband did to that boy, the entire neighborhood is horrified. I've got statements from 7 witnesses. We found Zach locked in a crawl space in the garage, dehydrated, covered in bruises. The EMT said another day, and..." Ron's hand gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "Where's my ex-wife?" "Carrie Lambert claims she didn't know. Says she was at work. We're investigating, but right now, our focus is on Armando Lambert. He's your ex's new husband. We arrested him, but his lawyer is already working on bail." Bradshaw paused, and Ron heard something unusual in his tone. Something personal. "I'm calling you off the clock, Sergeant. My shift ended an hour ago. I've got 3 kids of my own, and if someone did to them what Lambert did to Zach, well, let's just say I understand what you might be feeling right now." "Are you telling me what I think you're telling me?" Ron asked quietly. "I'm telling you that Armando Lambert posted bail 20 minutes ago. I'm telling you that the system sometimes fails kids like Zach. I'm telling you that you should come home to your son." Another pause. "And I'm telling you that if something were to happen to Lambert before his court date in 6 weeks, well, I'd have to investigate. But investigations take time, especially if they're complicated. You understand?" Ron understood perfectly. "I'll be on the next transport out. Your son asked for you. He keeps asking." Bradshaw's voice softened. "He's a brave kid, Sergeant. He didn't break, even when just come home." The call ended. Ron sat in the darkness, his mind already shifting from soldier to father, from following orders to creating a plan of his own. He'd spent 15 years in the Army, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, countless special operations he couldn't talk about. He'd learned patience, strategy, and how to eliminate threats with precision. Armando Lambert had just become a threat. Ron made 3 calls. The first was to his commanding officer, Captain Morris, explaining the family emergency. Morris, a father himself, expedited the paperwork. The second was to the hospital, identifying himself and demanding updates on Zach's condition. The nurse, Vivian Hagen, gave him the medical details: dehydration, contusions, 3 cracked ribs, psychological trauma. She also told him something that made Ron's jaw clench. Zach had defensive wounds on his hands and arms. His 12-year-old son had fought back. The third call was to his older brother, Bill Gillespie, who lived 2 hours from Riverside. Bill was a defense attorney, sharp and ruthless in court, and he would know how to navigate what was coming. "Ron? Jesus, it's 2 in the morning. What's wrong?" "Zach's in the hospital. Carrie's new husband beat him, locked him in a crawl space. I'm coming home, and I need you to do something for me. Anything. God, is Zach okay?" "He will be." Ron's voice carried a promise and a threat. "I need you to find out everything about Armando Lambert. I mean everything. Where he works, where he drinks, who he knows, what he owes, what skeletons are in his closet. I need it yesterday." Bill was quiet for a moment. He knew his younger brother, knew the tone in his voice. "Ron, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking about my son lying in a hospital bed because I wasn't there to protect him. I'm thinking about the man who did this walking free on bail. I'm thinking very clearly, Bill. Can you help me or not? I'll start tonight. But Ron, be smart about this. Zach needs you free, not in prison. I didn't survive 15 years in combat zones by being stupid. I'll call you when I land stateside. Ron packed his gear with mechanical efficiency, his mind already 6,000 miles away. He thought about Zach's last video call 3 days ago. His son had seemed quiet, subdued. Ron had attributed it to typical preteen moodiness, maybe struggling with his parents' divorce. Now he realized Zach had been trying to hide something, trying to be brave for his father who was fighting a war overseas. Ron had failed to see it. That failure burned in his chest like acid. By 0600 hours, he was on a transport helicopter to Bagram Airfield. By noon, he was on ACE-130 heading to Germany. By midnight, he was on a commercial flight from Frankfurt to Los Angeles. 36 hours of travel, 36 hours of planning, 36 hours of remembering every smile on Zach's face, every laugh, every "I love you, Dad" at the end of their calls. 36 hours of deciding exactly how Armando Lambert was going to pay. Chapter 2. The Devil You Married. The flight from Frankfurt gave Ron time to think, time to remember, and time to hate. He'd met Carrie Carr at a 4th of July barbecue in 2008, back when he was just a corporal with big dreams and bigger ambitions. She'd been a nursing student, beautiful and idealistic, drawn to his uniform and the confidence it represented. They'd married 6 months later. Too fast, his mother had warned, but Ron had been young and in love and certain he could make anything work. Zach was born in 2010, and for a while, they were happy. Ron's deployments strained the marriage, but they managed. Carrie was strong, or so he'd thought. She supported his career, raised Zach during the long absences, and Ron believed they had something solid. Then came the deployment to Syria in 2018. Ron was gone for 14 months, the longest stretch yet. When he came home, Carrie was different, distant, cold. She wanted a divorce. Ron fought for his family, but Carrie had made up her mind. She met someone else, she said. Someone who would actually be there. That someone was Armando Lambert. Ron's lawyer had been pessimistic from the start. She's the primary caregiver, she's got the stable home environment, and you're deployed most of the year. California courts favor the mother. Best case scenario, you get supervised visitation. The custody battle had been brutal. Carrie's attorney painted Ron as an absent father, too focused on his career to be a real parent. Armando Lambert had sat in the courtroom every day, holding Carrie's hand, playing the supportive new partner. Ron remembered the man's face, handsome in a manufactured way, always smiling, always deferential to the judge. He worked in medical equipment sales, made decent money, had no criminal record. On paper, he was perfect. The judge had awarded Carrie primary custody. Ron got Zach every other weekend and 2 months in the summer when he wasn't deployed. It had felt like losing a limb. But Ron had followed the rules, made every payment, never missed a scheduled call with Zach. He'd been the model non-custodial father, believing that eventually the system would see he deserved more time with his son. Now, staring out the window at the clouds below, Ron understood that the system had failed Zach. And Armando Lambert had never been perfect. He'd just been good at hiding what he really was. Bill's text came through as the plane descended into LAX. Got preliminary info. Lambert's got a sealed juvenile record, working on unsealing it. Works at Carson Medical Supply. 3 addresses in last 5 years. Drinks at O'Malley's bar on Fridays. More soon. Ron texted back, keep digging. What about Carrie? She filed for a restraining order against Lambert yesterday. Lawyer says she claims she didn't know about the abuse. I don't buy it. Ron didn't buy it either. Carrie wasn't stupid. She'd lived in that house, slept next to that monster. Either she'd known and done nothing, or she'd been too weak to protect their son. Either way, she'd failed Zach as much as Ron had. The difference was Ron was going to make it right. He rented a car at LAX and drove straight to Mercy General Hospital, arriving just after dawn. The hospital was quiet, the morning shift just beginning. Ron found Zach's room on the pediatric floor, his heart pounding harder than it ever had in combat. Detective Bradshaw was waiting outside the door. He was in his 50s, gray-haired, with the weathered face of a man who'd seen too much. He stood when Ron approached. Sergeant Gillespie. Hell of a trip. How is he? Ron asked. Physically, he'll heal. Mentally, Bradshaw shook his head. The doctors want him to talk to a therapist. He's been pretty shut down since we found him. Barely speaks. But he's been asking for you. Can I see him? Yeah. But Sergeant, what you see in there, it's going to make you want to do something rash. I need you to keep your head. Your son needs you functional, not in a cell next to Lambert. Where is Lambert now? Bradshaw's jaw tightened. He may bail, like I said. Judge set it at $50,000. He's staying with his brother, Oscar Lambert, in Huntington Beach. We've got a restraining order keeping him away from Zach and Carrie, but he met Ron's eyes. Restraining orders are just paper. They don't stop a determined man. No, Ron agreed. They don't. I'll be conducting a thorough investigation, Bradshaw continued, his tone carefully neutral. Interviewing neighbors, collecting evidence. These things take time, sometimes weeks, sometimes longer. He handed Ron a business card. My cell's on the back. You need anything, information, resources, whatever, you call me. Day or night. Ron pocketed the card, understanding the subtext. Bradshaw was giving him a window, a period of plausible deniability while the investigation moved at a bureaucratic crawl. I appreciate everything you've done for my son, Detective. Just doing my job. Bradshaw glanced at the door. He's awake. Go see your boy. Ron pushed open the door, and his heart shattered. Zach looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, his lips split. His arms were bandaged where he'd tried to defend himself. But when he saw Ron, his good eye widened and filled with tears. Dad! Ron crossed the room in 3 strides and carefully, so carefully, pulled his son into his arms. Zach sobbed against his chest, his thin body shaking, and Ron held him like he'd never let go. I'm here, buddy. I'm here. You're safe now. I'm sorry, Zach choked out. I'm sorry. I try to be tough like you, but he was so much bigger and Mom wasn't there and... Stop. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. You fought back, and that took more courage than anything I've ever done. You're the bravest person I know. They stayed like that for a long time. Ron murmuring reassurances, Zach crying out weeks of fear and pain. When Zach finally pulled back, his face blotchy and wet, he looked up at Ron with an expression that broke and rebuilt Ron's heart in the same moment. Are you going to hurt him, Dad? Armando. Ron could have lied. Could have told his son that the justice system would handle it. That violence wasn't the answer, that they had to trust the law. But Zach deserved the truth. Yes, Ron said simply. I am. Zach nodded slowly. Good. Chapter 3. Gathering Intelligence. Ron spent the next 2 days at Zach's bedside, leaving only to shower at Bill's house or make phone calls. The doctors confirmed that Zach could be discharged in 48 hours, but he'd need ongoing therapy and monitoring. The physical wounds would heal, but the psychological damage would take longer. Carrie showed up on the second day, looking haggard and afraid. Ron met her in the hallway, keeping his voice low and controlled despite the fury burning in his chest. How could you let this happen? Carrie's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know, Ron. I swear to God, I didn't know he was doing this. I worked double shifts, and Armando said Zach was just being a difficult teenager, and I believed him because I wanted to believe. You wanted to believe the man who replaced me wasn't a monster, Ron cut in. You wanted your perfect new life so badly that you ignored the signs. Did Zach ever try to tell you? Carrie's silence was answer enough. Get out, Ron said quietly. You don't deserve to be here. He's my son too. Then you should have acted like his mother. You should have protected him. You should have chosen him over that piece of shit you married. Ron stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Did he hurt you too, Carrie? Is that why you finally filed for a restraining order? Carrie's hand instinctively went to her left wrist, where a bracelet covered what Ron suspected were bruises. He changed, she whispered. After we got married, he changed. He was so charming at first, so attentive. But then he started getting jealous, controlling. When I pushed back, he'd get angry. He never hit me until 6 months ago. The first time, he apologized, bought me flowers, said it would never happen again. But it did. And when I threatened to leave, he said he'd make sure I never saw Zach again, that everyone would think I was an unfit mother. So you stayed, and Zach paid the price. I know, Carrie sobbed. I know, and I'll never forgive myself. But I'm leaving him now. I filed the restraining order. I'm cooperating with the police. I'm doing everything. Too little, too late. Ron turned away from her. Stay away from Zach until he's ready to see you. If he's ever ready. He walked back into Zach's room, leaving Carrie crying in the hallway. Ron felt no sympathy for her. She'd made her choices, and Zach had suffered for them. That evening, Bill arrived with a thick manila folder. They met in the hospital cafeteria, both nursing bad coffee while Bill laid out what he'd discovered. Armando Lambert is a piece of work, Bill began. Real name is Armando Wynn. He changed it legally when he turned 18, probably to distance himself from his family. His father, Antonio Wynn, is doing 25 to life in Folsom for attempted murder. His mother died of an overdose when he was 16. The sealed juvenile record? Ron asked. Unsealed it through a contact at the courthouse. Armando was arrested twice as a teenager, once for assault on a classmate, once for animal cruelty. Both cases were pleaded down with counseling. The assault victim was a girl he was dating who tried to break up with him. He put her in the hospital. Ron's hands clenched into fists. Pattern of behavior. Exactly. After he turned 18, he cleaned up his act, at least on paper. No arrests, steady employment, paid his taxes. But I did some digging into his personal life. He's been married twice before Carrie. First wife, Tanya Lambert, filed for divorce after 8 months, citing irreconcilable differences. I tracked her down. She wouldn't talk on record, but off record. She said he was a controlling psychopath who threatened to kill her dog if she ever left him. She did it anyway and moved across the country. Second wife, Betsy Lambert, married for 3 years, divorced 5 years ago. She also won't talk on record, but she filed 2 police reports during their marriage, both for domestic incidents. Both dropped when Armando convinced her not to press charges. After the divorce, she moved to Oregon. I called her. She said, and I quote, "If someone finally put that bastard in the ground, they'd be doing the world a favor." Ron absorbed this information, his tactical mind already processing it. Armando wasn't just a bad man who'd lost control once. He was a predator, a repeat offender who'd learned how to game the system and hide his true nature. What about his current life? Ron asked. You said he drinks at O'Malley's? Every Friday night like clockwork. He's also got a gambling problem. Owes about 30 grand to various bookies. Works at Carson Medical Supply, where his boss, Owen McCarthy, thinks he's God's gift to sales. But I talked to a few coworkers who say he's got a temper, that he's blown up at people in the office, that they think he's skimming from the company. Is he? Probably, but it's hard to prove. The company hasn't noticed anything yet. Bill pulled out a photo of Armando, a driver's license shot that showed a man in his late 30s with slick-back dark hair, a smug smile, and cold eyes. This is who we're dealing with. Ron studied the photo, memorizing every feature. What else? He's staying with his brother, Oscar, in Huntington Beach. Oscar runs a tattoo parlor, bit of a lowlife, but no major criminal record. How about the address? Armando's driving a leased BMW, black, license plate I've written down for you. His lawyer is a guy named Greg Barrett, known for getting abusers off on technicalities. Bill paused, watching his younger brother carefully. Ron, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. What are you planning? Ron met his brother's eyes. I'm planning to make sure Armando Lambert never hurts another child again. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got right now. Bill sighed and closed the folder. I can't be part of anything illegal, Ron. I'm an officer of the court. If you do something and I know about it beforehand, I'm obligated to report it. Understand. But Bill continued carefully, if you need legal representation after the fact, or if you need someone to help clean up a messy situation, or if you need me to drag out proceedings to buy you time, I'm your brother. I'll be there. Ron clasped Bill's hand across the table. Thank you. Just promise me one thing. Whatever you do, make sure Zach gets his father back when it's over. That kid needs you. I promise. After Bill left, Ron sat alone in the cafeteria, planning. He'd spent years training for missions, learning to assess targets, identify weaknesses, and execute with precision. This wasn't a war zone, but it was a mission. And like any mission, it required reconnaissance, strategy, and patience. Detective Bradshaw had given him a window weeks, maybe a month before the investigation concluded and the case went to trial. In that time, Armando would be free, walking around, thinking he'd beaten the system like he'd done before. But he hadn't counted on Ron Gillespie. Ron pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. He began typing. Target, Armando Lambert known locations, Brothers House, Huntington Beach, O'Malley's Bar Fridays, Carson Medical Supply, work, vulnerabilities, gambling debts, anger issues, history of violence against women, possible embezzlement goal, justice outside the system timeline. 4 to 6 weeks constraints, cannot directly implicate self, must protect Zach, must be able to return to normal life after. He stared at the list, his mind working through scenarios. He could simply kill Armando, make it look like an accident, or a robbery gone wrong, or any number of things. But that felt too easy, too quick. Armando deserved to suffer, to feel fear, to understand exactly what he'd done. Ron wanted Armando to know it was coming. He wanted him to feel the same helplessness Zach had felt locked in that crawl space. An idea began to form, dark and intricate. It would require more information, more planning, and the right leverage. But Ron had time, and he had motivation. He had plenty of both. Chapter 4. Know Your Enemy. Zach was discharged from the hospital on a Thursday morning. Ron took him to Bill's house, where a spare bedroom had been prepared with new clothes, books, and a gaming console. Zach moved through the space quietly, still withdrawn, flinching at sudden sounds. The therapist had warned Ron that recovery would be slow, that trust needed to be rebuilt. Ron made a promise to himself. He would be there for every step of Zach's recovery, and he would make sure Armando Lambert couldn't hurt anyone ever again. With Zach safe and Bill watching over him, Ron began his reconnaissance in earnest. He started with O'Malley's Bar on Friday evening, arriving early to scope out the location. It was a dive bar in a rough part of town, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and everybody minded their own business. Ron sat in a corner booth, nursing a beer, watching the door. Armando arrived at 9 p.m., exactly as Bill had predicted. He walked in like he owned the place, greeting the bartender by name, slapping other patrons on the back. He was handsome in that practiced way, expensive clothes and styled hair, but Ron could see the ugliness underneath. It was in the way he talked too loudly, demanding attention. The way he snapped his fingers at the waitress, Tracy Clayton, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who flinched when he barked his drink order. Ron watched Armando for 2 hours. He drank heavily, 4 whiskeys and 3 beers, and got progressively more belligerent. He argued with another patron over a pool game, getting in the man's face until the bartender threatened to throw him out. He hit on Tracy repeatedly, ignoring her obvious discomfort, grabbing her wrist where she tried to walk away. Ron's finger itched to break that hand. Around midnight, 3 men entered the bar, and Armando's demeanor changed instantly. He went from loud and aggressive to nervous and ingratiating. Ron recognized the type. Loan sharks or enforcers, probably here to collect on Armando's gambling debts. One of them, a heavy-set man with scarred knuckles, leaned in close to Armando and said something that made Armando's face go pale. They talked for 10 minutes in hushed tones, Armando nodding frantically, promising something. The heavy-set man clapped him on the shoulder, too hard, a warning, and left with his companions. Armando sat alone at the bar after that, staring into his drink, his false bravado gone. He looked like what he was, a desperate man in over his head. Ron filed that information away. Gambling debts were leverage. He followed Armando when he left the bar at 1 a.m., weaving slightly as he walked to his BMW. Ron had parked nearby, and he tailed Armando's car at a safe distance. Armando drove to a 24-hour convenience store, where he bought more alcohol and a lottery ticket, the desperation of a gambling addict. Then he drove to his brother Oscar's house in Huntington Beach, a rundown duplex near the beach. Ron parked down the street and watched Armando stumble inside. Lights came on in one of the bedrooms, then went out 20 minutes later. Ron sat in his car until dawn, thinking. Over the next week, Ron established a pattern. He learned Armando's routine, his habits, his weaknesses. Armando went to work at Carson Medical Supply every weekday, leaving at 8 a.m. and returning around 6 p.m. He had lunch at the same diner every day, flirting with the waitress, and Fernandez, who tolerated him with barely concealed disgust. He went to the gym on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, spending more time admiring himself in the mirror than actually working out. And every Friday, like clockwork, he went to O'Malley's bar. Ron also dug into Armando's work life. He posed as a potential client and toured Carson Medical Supply, where he met Armando's boss, Owen McCarthy, a friendly man who clearly had no idea what kind of person he'd hired. Ron also struck up a conversation with one of Armando's co-workers, a bitter man named Jonathan Duffy, who was more than happy to vent about his colleague. "Armando's a snake," Jonathan said over coffee in the break room. "Always taking credit for other people's work, always sucking up to Owen while treating the rest of us like garbage. And I think he's stealing from the company. I've seen him fudging numbers on his sales reports, pocketing the difference. But he's careful, and Owen trusts him, so nobody's investigated." "Why not report it?" Ron asked. "Because Armando's got a vicious streak. Last guy who crossed him, Armando spread rumors that he was embezzling, and the guy got fired. Turned out to be false, but by then, the damage was done. Nobody wants to be next." Ron thanked Jonathan and left, adding embezzlement to his list of Armando's crimes. It wasn't creative enough to be the centerpiece of his revenge, but it was useful information. The real breakthrough came when Ron followed up on Armando's gambling debts. He returned to O'Malley's midweek and struck up a conversation with the bartender, a grizzled man named Nelson Rojas, who'd been working there for 20 years. "Armando Lambert?" Nelson grunted. "Yeah, he's in deep with some bad people. Owes money to Kelvin McGrath. Runs book out of a warehouse on the east side. McGrath's not a guy you want to owe money to. He's old school, if you know what I mean." "How much does Armando owe?" Nelson shrugged. "Last I heard, 30, maybe 40 grand. He keeps betting, keeps losing. He's got a problem, but he won't admit it. Guys like that never do." Ron left the bar and drove to the east side, locating the warehouse Nelson had mentioned. It was a nondescript building in an industrial area, but Ron could see the signs of activity: expensive cars parked outside, men coming and going at odd hours. This was Kelvin McGrath's operation. Ron didn't approach. Not yet, but he filed it away as another piece of the puzzle. By the end of the first week, Ron had a complete picture of Armando's life. He was a man juggling multiple lies, surviving on charm and intimidation, always one step away from everything crashing down. Ron was going to give him that push. Chapter 5. The First Move. Ron's plan began to take shape. He wasn't going to kill Armando, not directly. Instead, he was going to systematically dismantle his life, exposing every lie, every crime, every weakness. He was going to make Armando paranoid, desperate, and alone. And then, when Armando was at his lowest, Ron would make his final move. The first step was to deal with the gambling debt. Ron arranged a meeting with Kelvin McGrath through Nelson, the bartender who acted as an intermediary. They met at a diner on the outskirts of town, McGrath bringing 2 bodyguards who looked like they could bench press a car. Kelvin McGrath was in his 60s, gray-haired and cold-eyed, with the bearing of a man who'd spent his life in the shadows. He listened without expression as Ron introduced himself. "I understand Armando Lambert owes you money," Ron began. "He does. $42,000, to be exact, plus interest." McGrath's voice was flat. "Why do you care?" "Because I want to make his life hell, and I think you can help me." McGrath leaned back in his booth, studying Ron. "You military?" "Army. 15 years. I can tell. You got that look. So what's Lambert to you?" "He put my son in the hospital. Beat him, locked him in a crawl space, left him to die. The system's not moving fast enough, so I'm handling it myself." McGrath's expression didn't change, but Ron saw something shift in his eyes, a flicker of understanding. "I've got grandkids," McGrath said quietly. "Someone did that to one of mine. I'd bury him in the desert. So yeah, I'll help you. What do you need? How much does Lambert pay you every week?" "He's supposed to pay $500 a week. Hasn't paid in 3 weeks. That's why my guys visited him at the bar. I want you to increase the pressure. Double the payments, shorten the timeline. Make him desperate. That's easy. What else? When he inevitably can't pay, I want you to make it personal. Go to his work, his brother's house, make a scene. Embarrass him publicly. Let everyone know what he is. McGrath smiled for the first time, a thin, cruel expression. I like the way you think. Anything else? When the time comes, I may need you to deliver a message for me. I'll pay you for your trouble. Keep your money. Anyone who hurts kids doesn't deserve to breathe. I'll do this for free. McGrath extended his hand, and Ron shook it. Consider it done. The second step was to expose Armando's embezzlement at work. Ron returned to Carson Medical Supply and requested a meeting with Owen McCarthy, posing as a concerned former client who'd noticed discrepancies in his invoices. He brought fabricated evidence, carefully altered documents that matched Armando's pattern of theft, and laid them out for Owen. I believe one of your salespeople has been overcharging clients and pocketing the difference, Ron explained. I compare my invoices with another client's, and the numbers don't match up. It looks like someone's running a skim. Owen's face went red as he reviewed the documents. This is serious. Do you know who's responsible? The salesman I dealt with was Armando Lambert. Owen's expression hardened. I'll investigate this immediately. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Ron left, confident that Owen would dig deeper and find the real evidence of Armando's theft. It was only a matter of time before Armando lost his job. The third step was the most personal. Ron contacted Armando's ex-wives, Tanya and Betsy, and convinced them to file official complaints with the police about their past abuse. It took some persuading, but both women were still terrified of Armando, and Ron's calm, professional demeanor reassured them. He promised that Detective Bradshaw would protect them, that their statements would help build a pattern of behavior case that would keep Armando in prison for a long time. Both women agreed. Their statements were damning, detailing years of psychological and physical abuse, threats, and manipulation. Bradshaw added them to his investigation file, and suddenly, Armando's defense attorney had a much bigger problem. Within 2 weeks, Ron's plan was in motion. Armando's world began to collapse. Kelvin McGrath's enforcers showed up at Carson Medical Supply, demanding payment in front of Armando's co-workers. Owen McCarthy launched an internal investigation into the embezzlement, suspending Armando without pay. The police added the ex-wives' statements to the case file, and the prosecutor upgraded the charges against Armando from child endangerment to aggravated assault with a pattern of domestic violence. Armando's lawyer, Greg Barrett, called for an emergency meeting, trying to negotiate a plea deal. But the prosecutor, emboldened by the mountain of evidence, refused. Ron watched it all from a distance, patient and methodical. He visited Zach every day, taking him to therapy, helping him with homework, rebuilding their relationship. Zach was slowly coming out of his shell, smiling more, sleeping better. The therapist said he was making excellent progress. I feel safe when you're here, Dad, Zach said one evening as they played video games at Bill's house. I'm not going anywhere, Ron promised. Ever. Is Armando going to jail? Yes. For a long time. Good. Zach paused the game and looked at Ron. But I know you're doing more than just waiting for the trial. You're hurting him, aren't you? Ron didn't insult his son's intelligence by lying. Yes. I don't want you to get in trouble because of me. You let me worry about that. All you need to worry about is getting better and being a kid. Zach nodded and unpaused the game, but Ron could see the relief in his eyes. His son needed to know that justice was being served, that the monster who'd hurt him was paying. And Armando was paying. Ron made sure of it. Chapter 6, The Trap Springs. 3 weeks after Ron arrived home, Armando Lambert's life was in ruins. He'd lost his job after the embezzlement investigation found over $50,000 in stolen funds. Owen McCarthy fired him publicly, in front of the entire staff, and threatened to press charges. Armando's lawyer advised him to quietly return the money to avoid additional criminal charges, but Armando didn't have it. He'd gambled most of it away. Kelvin McGrath's enforcers came calling again, this time at Oscar's house in the middle of the night. They smashed Armando's BMW windows and left a note that said, "Pay up or pay the price." Oscar, furious at having his home targeted, told Armando to leave. Armando was forced to move into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, paying cash he didn't have. His court date was approaching, and his lawyer had delivered grim news. With the ex-wife's statements and the overwhelming evidence, a guilty verdict was almost certain. Armando was looking at 10 to 15 years in prison. Ron monitored all of this through his network, Bill, Detective Bradshaw, and various contacts he cultivated. Armando was isolated, desperate, and paranoid. Perfect. On a Thursday evening, Ron made his move. He'd been watching Armando's new motel, a seedy establishment called the Sunset Inn. Armando spent most of his time in his room, only leaving to buy cheap food and more alcohol. He was drowning his problems, spiraling. Ron waited until midnight, then broke into Armando's room. It was easy. The locks were flimsy, and Ron had 15 years of experience in covert operations. Armando was passed out drunk on the bed, snoring loudly, an empty bottle of whiskey on the nightstand. Ron stood over him for a moment, looking at the man who'd tortured his son. It would be so easy to end it here, a pillow over the face, a quick snap of the neck. But that wasn't the plan. Instead, Ron pulled out a burner phone and placed it on the nightstand where Armando would see it when he woke up. Then he left, disappearing into the night. When Armando woke the next morning, groggy and hungover, he saw the phone immediately. It was ringing. Confused and frightened, he answered. "Hello, Armando." Ron's voice was calm, almost friendly. "We need to talk." "Who is this? How did you get in here?" "My name is Ron Gillespie. You hurt my son." There was a long silence. Ron could hear Armando's breathing quicken. I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You beat Zach. You locked him in a crawl space. You left him there to die. And now you're going to pay for it. I've got a trial. The courts will handle it. If you're threatening me, I'll call the police." "Go ahead. But before you do, let me tell you what's going to happen. Your trial is in 3 weeks. You're going to be convicted. You're going to spend the next 10 to 15 years in prison. And I've made sure that everyone in that prison knows exactly what you did. Child abusers don't last long inside, Armando. You know that, right?" Armando's voice cracked. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something. Everything that's happened to you in the past 3 weeks, your job, your debts, your lawyer, your family turning on you, that was all me. I orchestrated every piece of it. I'm the reason your life is falling apart. And I'm not done yet. You're insane." "No, I'm a father. There's a difference." Ron's voice hardened. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to plead guilty at your trial. You're going to allocate fully, admitting every detail of what you did to Zach. You're going to apologize to my son in open court. And then you're going to accept your sentence without appeal. And if I don't, then I'll make sure your life in prison is even worse than it would be otherwise. I have contacts, Armando, people on the inside who owe me favors. I can make your existence a living hell, where you can cooperate, and maybe you'll survive your sentence. You can't do this. You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Check your motel room. I was standing over you while you slept. I could have killed you any time I wanted. I still can. But that will be too easy. I want you to suffer. I want you to feel what Zach felt. Helpless, terrified, alone. So you're going to cooperate, or I'm going to get creative." Ron hung up. Armando sat in his motel room, staring at the phone, his hands shaking. He looked around the room, realizing that someone had been here, had watched him sleep. The violation of it, the vulnerability, made him feel sick. For the first time in his life, Armando Lambert understood what it was like to be prey. Chapter 7. Desperation. Armando didn't sleep for the next 2 days. Every sound outside his motel room made him jump. He started drinking more, trying to numb the fear, but it only made things worse. He was haunted by the voice on the phone, calm, controlled, relentless. He called his lawyer, Greg Barrett, in a panic. "Someone's threatening me. Ron Gillespie, the father of the kid. He broke into my room. He's been orchestrating everything. He's trying to—" "Slow down," Barrett interrupted. "What exactly did he say?" Armando recounted the conversation, his voice shaking. When he finished, Barrett was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have any proof? Recordings, witnesses, anything?" "No, but he admitted it. He said he's the reason I lost my job, my debts, everything. Without evidence, it's your word against his. And frankly, Armando, your word isn't worth much right now. You're facing serious charges. If you start accusing the victim's father of orchestrating some elaborate revenge plot, it's going to look like desperation. So what am I supposed to do? Take the plea deal. The prosecutor's offering 8 years with possibility of parole. It's the best you're going to get. 8 years? I can't. You can, and you will. Because the alternative is 15 to 20. Your choice. Armando hung up and threw the phone across the room. He was trapped, boxing on all sides. The trial was in 2 weeks, and he had no way out. That night, he made a mistake. Desperate and drunk, Armando drove to Carrie's apartment. He knew he had a restraining order, knew he'd be arrested if caught, but he didn't care. He needed to talk to her, needed someone to see his side, to help him. Carrie opened the door, her face going pale when she saw him. You can't be here. The restraining order. Please, Armando begged. I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes. No, leave, or I'm calling the police. Carrie, please. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt Zach, but I can change. If you just testify for me, tell the court I'm not a monster. You are a monster. Carrie's voice was cold. You beat a child, Armando. My child. You locked him in a crawl space like an animal. There's nothing you can say that will make me help you. Ron's behind all of this. Armando's voice rose. He's been sabotaging me, threatening me. He broke into my motel room. Good. I hope he destroys you. Now, get out. She slammed the door. Armando stood there, breathing hard, his mind racing. He needed to regain control, needed to turn the tables somehow. A dark thought occurred to him. If Ron was the one orchestrating everything, then maybe Armando could use that. He could provoke Ron, make him do something reckless, something that would get Ron arrested instead. If Armando could prove Ron was harassing him, threatening him, it could cast doubt on the entire case. It was a desperate plan, but Armando was out of options. He drove to Bill's house, where he knew Zach was staying. He parked down the street and waited, watching the house. He didn't have a plan beyond confronting Ron, forcing a reaction. But Ron wasn't there. Only Bill and Zach were home. Armando sat in his car for an hour, working up the courage. Then he saw Zach come outside to take out the trash. Something snapped in Armando's mind. He was tired of being the victim, tired of running. He got out of his car and approached Zach. Zach saw him and froze, his face going white with terror. Stay away from me, Zach said, his voice barely a whisper. I just want to talk, Armando said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. I know you're scared, but I need you to tell your father to back off. He's threatening me, trying to ruin my life. You ruined your own life, Zach shouted, his fear turning to anger. You hurt me. You locked me in that crawl space. You deserve everything that's happening to you. I made a mistake, okay? I was stressed, I lost control, but I'm not a bad person. If you just listen, get away from him. Ron's voice cut through the air like a blade. He'd appeared from around the corner, having returned from a grocery run. He was carrying bags, but he dropped them immediately, his entire focus on Armando. Armando took a step back, suddenly realizing how badly he'd miscalculated. This is a violation of your restraining order, Ron said, his voice deadly calm. You're not supposed to be within 500 feet of my son. I was just talking. You were threatening him. Again, Ron pulled out his phone and started recording. Zach, go inside. Call your Uncle Bill and tell him to call Detective Bradshaw. Zach ran inside, and Armando found himself alone with Ron. You wanted to provoke me, Ron said, still recording. You wanted me to attack you so you could claim I was the aggressor. But you forgot one thing. What? I'm smarter than you. Ron stepped closer. You just violated your restraining order in front of multiple witnesses. You approached my minor son, who you're specifically forbidden from contacting. That's a felony. Detective Bradshaw is going to love this. Armando realized he'd been outplayed. Again, now get in your car and leave before I stop being a law-abiding citizen, Ron continued. Because if you're still here when the police arrive, I might forget that I'm being recorded. Armando stumbled back to his car and drove away, his heart pounding. He made everything worse. The police would be looking for him, his bail would be revoked, and he'd spend the next 2 weeks in jail before his trial. He lost. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Armando was arrested the next day at his motel. Detective Bradshaw personally handled the arrest, reading Armando his rights with obvious satisfaction. The bail was revoked, and Armando was held in county lockup until his trial. In jail, Armando learned that Ron's threats hadn't been empty. Within hours of his arrival, the other inmates knew why he was there. Someone had spread the word, probably someone Ron had paid, that Armando was a child abuser. Prison has its own justice system. The first night, Armando was beaten in the showers by 3 inmates. The guards didn't arrive until it was over. Armando spent the night in the infirmary, nursing broken ribs and a fractured jaw. When his lawyer visited the next day, Armando could barely speak. "I'll take the plea deal," he whispered through wired teeth. "Smart choice," Barrett said without sympathy. The trial came 2 weeks later. Armando, wearing an orange jumpsuit and sporting visible injuries, entered the courtroom looking like a broken man. Ron sat in the gallery with Zach, both watching as justice unfolded. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically: medical reports, witness statements, photographs of Zach's injuries, testimony from neighbors who'd heard Zach's screams. The ex-wives testified about Armando's history of abuse, painting a picture of a serial abuser who'd finally escalated to attempting to kill a child. When it was Armando's turn to allocute as part of his guilty plea, he stood before the judge and read from a prepared statement. His lawyer had coached him, but the words still sounded hollow. "I plead guilty to aggravated assault and child endangerment. I hurt Zach Gillespie. I lost control. I locked him in the crawl space, and I didn't check on him for 2 days. I knew he was hurt, and I didn't help him. I'm sorry." The judge, a stern woman named Leona Allison, stared down at Armando with open contempt. "Mr. Lambert, in 30 years on the bench, I've seen many terrible things. But what you did to this child, it's one of the worst. You're not just a criminal. You're a predator who targets the vulnerable. I'm sentencing you to 15 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for 10 years. And I hope that every single day you spend behind bars reminds you of what you did." Armando sagged in his chair. 15 years. He'd be nearly 55 when he got out, if he survived that long. After the sentencing, Ron approached the prosecutor and shook her hand. "Thank you. Thank Detective Bradshaw," she replied. "He built an airtight case. And thank you for not taking matters into your own hands. I know how tempting that must have been." Ron smiled slightly. "Who says I didn't?" The prosecutor gave him a sharp look, but Ron was already walking away toward Zach and Bill. That evening, Ron got a call from Detective Bradshaw. "Congratulations. Lambert's going away for a long time. Thanks to you. And thanks to you. I don't know exactly what you did, but Lambert fell apart in the past month. Lost his job, his housing, his support system. Almost like someone orchestrated it." "Almost," Ron agreed. "I'm not going to ask questions I don't want answers to. But I will say this: you did good, Sergeant. You protected your son and stayed on the right side of the law. That takes discipline. I learned from the best." After hanging up, Ron joined Zach and Bill for a celebratory dinner. Zach was smiling more than he had in months. The weight of the trial finally lifted. "Is it really over?" Zach asked. "It's over," Ron confirmed. "Armando's going to prison. You're safe. We can move forward." "What about Mom?" Ron had been dreading this question. "What do you want to do about your mom?" Zach thought for a long moment. "I don't know. I'm still mad at her. But maybe eventually we can talk. When I'm ready." "That's fair. You take all the time you need." Later that night, after Zach had gone to bed, Bill pulled Ron aside. "I'm proud of you, little brother. You could have killed Lambert, and no one would have blamed you. But you were smart about it." "I wanted him to suffer," Ron said quietly. "A quick death would have been too easy. Now he gets to spend the next decade looking over his shoulder, knowing that every day could be his last. You're ruthless when you need to be. I learned that in the Army. But I also learned patience. Armando Lambert thought he could hurt my son and get away with it. He was wrong." Chapter 9. Moving Forward. 3 months after the trial, Ron officially retired from the Army. He'd serve his country honorably, but Zach needed him more than the military did. He used his savings and veterans benefits to buy a small house in a good school district, close to Bill and far from Riverside. Zach started a new school where no one knew his history. He made friends, joined the soccer team, and slowly began to heal. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were less frequent. Therapy helped, and so did having Ron home every night. Carrie reached out tentatively, asking if she could see Zach. Ron left the decision to his son. "I'll see her," Zach said after thinking about it. "But only with you there, and only for an hour." The meeting was awkward and painful. Carrie cried, apologized repeatedly, and begged for forgiveness. Zach listened, but didn't offer absolution. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Zach told her. "You were supposed to protect me, and you didn't. That hurts worse than anything Armando did." "I understand," Carrie whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back, even if it takes years." "It probably will." After Carrie left, Zach turned to Ron. "Was that okay? That I didn't forgive her?" "More than okay. Forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone. It's something you give when you're ready. And maybe you'll never be ready, and that's okay too." "Thanks, Dad." Ron received periodic updates about Armando through Detective Bradshaw. The reports were grim. Armando had been transferred to 3 different prisons due to repeated attacks from other inmates. He'd spent months in solitary confinement for his own protection. He'd attempted suicide once and been placed on psychiatric watch. Ron felt no sympathy. One evening, 6 months after the trial, Zach and Ron were sitting on their porch watching the sunset. Zach had been quiet all day, contemplative. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Did you do more than just let the justice system work? Did you hurt Armando?" Ron considered his answer carefully. "I made sure that Armando faced consequences for what he did. I made sure he couldn't hide behind lawyers or charm his way out of it. I made sure he understood what it felt like to be helpless and afraid. So yes." "Yes." Zach nodded slowly. "Good. He deserved it. Do you think less of me for it?" "No. I think you're the bravest person I know. You did what needed to be done." Zach paused. "I'm glad you're my dad." Ron pulled his son into a hug, and Zach didn't pull away. "I'm glad you're my son, and I promise you, no one will ever hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing." "I know." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Ron thought about the past year, the pain, the rage, the careful orchestration of Armando's downfall. He'd broken some laws, bent others, and crossed lines he'd once thought were sacred. But he'd do it all again in a heartbeat, because some things were worth more than following rules. Family was worth more. Zach was worth more. And Armando Lambert had learned that lesson the hard way. 2 years later, Ron received a final piece of news. Armando had been killed in prison during a riot. The official report said he'd been caught in the crossfire, but Ron knew better. Someone had finally finished what Ron had started. He didn't tell Zach. There was no need. The monster was gone, and Zach was thriving. Honor roll student, star soccer player, happy kid with a bright future. That was the only ending that mattered. Ron stood in his backyard, watching Zach practice soccer with his friends, and felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He'd kept his promise. He'd protected his son. He made the bad man pay. And now, finally, they could both move forward. The reckoning was complete. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.